The halls of the Galactic Federation's Xenobiology Academy buzzed with nervous energy. Today was no ordinary day on planet Serenity. It marked the arrival of the first human exchange students in the Academy's history. Creatures from across the stars gathered in clusters, whispering among themselves as they waited for their first glimpse of the Deathworlders. Professor Dak glided into the lecture hall, his 8 limbs moving in perfect harmony. The respected scientist's silvery skin rippled with excitement as he gestured toward the door. I present to you our newest classmates from Earth. 3 humans walked in. Not particularly tall or physically imposing, yet every alien student fell silent. These beings came from a Class 12 death world, a planet so harsh and unforgiving that most species wouldn't survive a single day there. I am Tay, said the tallest human, his voice surprisingly gentle. Thanks for having us here. I'm Gu, the female human added with a smile that revealed her flat teeth. Several amphibian students from the water worlds flinched at the sight. And I'm Hanbin, said the third, his dark eyes scanning the room curiously. Professor Dak clapped his upper limbs together. These fine students will join us for the semester. They've come to learn about galactic biodiversity, and we have much to learn from them as well. A tentative blue appendage rose from the back row. It belonged to Pip, a blob-like creature from the methane seas of Titan. Is it true that your world has over 8,000 species of natural predators? Pip's voice quivered slightly. Tay laughed. That's just the birds. We've got way more than that. The classroom erupted in nervous murmurs. Birds were flying predators on many worlds, usually apex hunters. The humans were casually discussing thousands of them as if it were nothing. Don't worry, Gu said, noticing the tension. We coexist with most of them pretty well. Actually, I miss my roommate back home. She pulled out a small hologram projector from her pocket and activated it. The image showed Gu curled up on something called a couch, with a small furry creature draped across her lap. It had piercing eyes and visible fangs. A high-pitched shriek came from the front row. Lomi, a delicate plant-based intelligence from the gardens of Verdant, had nearly wilted in terror. That's a predator. It has killing teeth. Gu looked confused. This is just my cat, Bori. She's a pet. Pet? Several voices asked in unison. Yes, a companion animal. She lives with me, sleeps on my bed, keeps me company. Hanbin pulled out his own hologram. My family has 2 dogs. They're bigger than cats. The image showed 2 large canine creatures. Tongues lolling, powerful jaws clearly visible, standing beside a smiling Hanbin. Professor Dak's upper limbs trembled slightly. Even he, with all his xenobiology experience, found the concept startling. You're saying you share your living spaces? With predatory species. Voluntarily? Sure. Tay shrugged. Humans have been keeping animals as companions for thousands of years. Dogs, cats, birds, fish, reptiles, lots of different creatures. The classroom fell silent as the alien students processed this information. These humans didn't just survive on their deadly homeworld. They brought its predators into their homes, fed them, and slept beside them. But why? Asked Gorks, a silicon-based student whose crystalline structure glinted under the lights. What purpose do these creatures serve? Purpose. Gu seemed puzzled by the question. They're family. They give us emotional support, companionship, love. Love? From a predator? Pip's body rippled with disbelief. Absolutely. Hanbin nodded. My dog Dury gets so excited when I come home that he jumps all over me. He sleeps at the foot of my bed and protects our house. The concept was so foreign that several students began recording the conversation on their data pads, likely to share with their homeworlds later. Professor Dak, ever the scientist, tried to make sense of it. So humans have evolved a unique symbiotic relationship with potentially dangerous species. Fascinating adaptation strategy. I wouldn't overthink it, Tay smiled. We just like them, and they like us back. A small reptilian student named Flix raised a scaled hand. Do these pets ever harm you? Well, sometimes Bori scratches me when she's playing too rough, Gu admitted. Several students gasped. One fainted. "It's just little scratches," she quickly added. "Nothing serious. She doesn't mean any harm." "You allow it to draw your blood?" Professor Dak couldn't hide his shock. Hanbin laughed. "Wait until you hear about Earth sports. We do far worse to each other for fun." The orientation continued for another hour, with the human students answering increasingly alarmed questions about Earth and its inhabitants. By the end, the alien students viewed their new classmates with a mixture of fear, respect, and bewilderment. As they filed out of the lecture hall, Professor Dak overheard Gorks whispering to Pip, "Did you see how casually they speak of living with killers? No wonder they survived a death world. Perhaps humans are more dangerous than the creatures they tame." Little did they know, the true extent of human-animal relationships would soon be demonstrated in a way none of them could have anticipated. The containment field in the Dangerous Species Exhibition Wing was already showing signs of weakness, with the Venusian razor locusts testing the barriers of their enclosure. In just 3 weeks, the alien students would learn that humans weren't just capable of surviving alongside deadly creatures. They had a gift for taming them. 3 weeks had passed since the arrival of the human students at the Galactic Federation's Xenobiology Academy on Serenity. The initial shock of their casual attitude toward predators had somewhat faded, though many alien students still kept a cautious distance. It happened during third period, when most students were attending Professor Dak's lecture on symbiotic relationships. The Academy's alarm system erupted with a sound so jarring that several crystalline students nearly shattered. "Emergency protocols activated," announced the automated system. "Containment breach in Dangerous Species Exhibition Wing. All beings proceed to designated safety chambers immediately." Panic spread through the lecture hall. Professor Dak's 8 limbs moved rapidly as he tried to maintain order. "Stay calm. Follow evacuation procedures," he called over the chaos. "The safety chambers will protect you until the security team handles this." Students rushed toward the exits, some slithering, others floating, many screaming in their native languages. Professor Dak did a quick head count as they filed past. "Where are the humans?" he suddenly realized, his voice rising with alarm. Nobody had seen them. The evacuation continued while Professor Dak frantically checked his communication device. He pulled up the security feeds, and what he saw made his 3 hearts nearly stop. The footage showed Tae, Jiu, and Hanbin moving through the corridors, not toward the safety chambers but directly toward the containment breach. "Computer, what species have escaped?" Professor Dak asked, dreading the answer. "Venusian razor locusts, pack of 6. Caution, extremely dangerous. Mandibles capable of cutting through standard alloys. Highly aggressive territorial behavior." Professor Dak watched in horror as the security feed showed the humans approaching the exhibition wing. He opened an emergency channel to them. "What are you doing? Get to safety immediately." Tae's voice came through clearly. "We can help. We've got this, Professor. You don't understand. These are not cats or dogs. These creatures have killed trained handlers." "Trust us," Jiu replied calmly. "We've read about them. We know what to do." The security feed switched to the exhibition wing. The razor locusts were there, each one the size of a small table, their metallic-looking exoskeletons gleaming under the emergency lights. Their mandibles clicked rapidly, a sound that sent shivers through any being familiar with them. They had already shredded display cases and decorative plants, leaving destruction in their wake. The 3 humans entered the room slowly. Instead of showing fear, they moved with surprising confidence. Hanbin reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. "Is that food?" Professor Dak whispered to himself in disbelief. The aliens who had gathered around the security monitors watched in stunned silence as Marcus made a series of clicking sounds with his mouth, mimicking the locust's communication patterns. The lead locust turned toward him, mandibles spread wide, a classic attack posture. "They're going to die," whispered Pip, who had joined Professor Dak. "Should we override the lockdown?" But instead of retreating, Tae continued making the clicking sounds while slowly lowering his body to appear less threatening. Jiu had positioned herself to the side, her hands moving in slow, deliberate motions. The lead locust tilted its antenna-covered head, appearing confused by this strange response. In most encounters, other species either attacked or fled. These creatures were doing neither. Look at that. Professor Dak pointed to the screen. The locusts' mandibles are slowing their movement. That's a sign of curiosity, not aggression. Hanbin gently tossed a small treat toward the lead locust. It skittered forward, examined the offering with its sensory appendages, then consumed it. The other locusts watched, their previously frantic movements becoming more measured. Tay continued the clicking sounds while slowly extending his hand, palm down, a non-threatening gesture. The lead locust approached cautiously. Impossible, breathed an arachnid student watching the feed. Those creatures attacked my species on sight during the Venusian conflicts. Yet the impossible was happening. The lead locust was now allowing Tay to touch its outer shell, just behind its sensory organs, a spot the humans had somehow identified. As sensitive, Jiu had begun a low humming sound that seemed to calm the other locusts. They gathered around her, their previously aggressive postures relaxing. One even rolled onto its back, a position of extreme vulnerability for its species. "They're playing with them," Professor Dak said, his voice barely audible. "How are they doing this?" Within 10 minutes, the humans had all 6 razor locusts following them like trained pets. They led the creatures back to their containment area, Hanbin occasionally tossing treats to reinforce the behavior. Once inside, Tay activated the repaired containment field while Jiu and Hanbin distracted the locusts with more treats and sounds. When the field hummed back to life, the humans calmly walked out, dusting off their hands as if they'd completed nothing more remarkable than a homework assignment. The lockdown lifted 30 minutes later. Students and faculty emerged from safety chambers to find the 3 humans sitting casually in the common area, sharing snacks. "The situation has been resolved," announced the system. "All dangerous specimens have been contained." Professor Dak approached the humans, his limbs still trembling slightly. "How did you do that? Those creatures have been responsible for 17 fatalities across 3 star systems." Tay looked up, surprised by the question. "We just used basic animal handling techniques, positive reinforcement, non-threatening body language, identifying their comfort zones." "But how did you know where to touch them, or what sounds to make?" asked Pip, who had gathered enough courage to join the conversation. "We studied their anatomy in xenobiology class," Jiu explained. "Their sensory nodes are similar to some Earth insects, and their communication patterns aren't that different from some species we've encountered." Hanbin added, "Plus, we brought snacks. Most creatures respond well to food rewards." "Snacks?" Professor Dak repeated, still trying to process what he had witnessed. "You tamed one of the deadliest species in the Federation with snacks." The 3 humans exchanged glances, trying not to smile at the professor's bewilderment. "Well, yeah," Tay shrugged. "That's pretty much how we domesticated most animals on Earth. Food, patience, and understanding their behavior." By evening, the security footage had spread across the entire academy. Students who had previously avoided the humans now watched them with newfound fascination and respect. Some even approached them with questions about Earth's creatures and human domestication techniques. Professor Dak sat alone in his office that night, rewatching the footage for the 12th time. Something extraordinary had happened, something that challenged everything he thought he knew about interspecies relationships. These Deathworlders didn't just survive among deadly creatures. They seemed to possess an almost supernatural ability to connect with them. The Academy Board had already scheduled an emergency meeting for the next morning. This incident demanded investigation. The Academy Board room buzzed with tension. 12 of the galaxy's foremost xenobiologists sat around a massive table, their diverse physiologies representing planets from across the Federation. At the center of attention stood Tay, Jiu, and Hanbin, the 3 human exchange students who had somehow tamed creatures that seasoned professionals couldn't handle. "This meeting of the Academy Board is now in session," announced Principal Vrax, a tall, thin being with translucent skin through which nervous electrical pulses could be seen racing. We are here to investigate yesterday's incident involving the containment breach of Venusian razor locusts. Professor Dak rose on his 8 limbs. As primary witness, I can confirm that these 3 humans safely guided 6 escaped razor locusts back to containment using nothing but sounds, gestures, and food rewards. A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. Impossible, declared Professor Zith, the Academy's senior predator specialist. Her scaled face twisted with skepticism. I've studied those creatures for 40 cycles. They respond only to dominance, displays, and force fields. Tay stepped forward. With respect, Professor, that approach might be why you've had limited success. They respond much better to positive reinforcement. Professor Zith's scales flushed a dark orange, a sign of irritation in her species. Are you suggesting that 3 untrained students understand these creatures better than I do? Not at all, Jiu interjected smoothly. We just have a different perspective. On Earth, we've developed various approaches to animal behavior. Principal Vrax raised a glowing appendage. That is precisely what we wish to understand. How could Deathworlders, like yourselves, possess such intuitive ability to tame lethal species? Hanbin looked at his fellow humans, then addressed the board. It's not really mysterious. Earth has a long history of animal domestication going back thousands of years. Please elaborate, requested Professor Dak, genuinely curious. Tai pulled out a small device and projected images into the center of the room. This is what we call a wolf, one of Earth's apex predators. The image showed a fierce canine creature with sharp teeth. And this is a dog. The image changed to show various breeds of domestic dogs. Dogs evolved from wolves through a domestication process that began over 15,000 years ago. The board members leaned forward, fascinated and horrified in equal measure. You're saying you turned an apex predator into companions? Asked a gelatinous board member, her translucent body rippling with shock. Exactly, Jiu confirmed, and we did the same with cats, horses, birds of prey, and dozens of other species. She projected more images. Fierce wildcats and their domestic descendants, massive horses carrying humans on their backs, falcons returning to human arms. But why would dangerous creatures allow this? Professor Zith demanded. Mutual benefit, Hanbin explained. We provided food, shelter, protection. They provided services, companionship, and eventually formed emotional bonds with us. Emotional bonds? With predators? The very concept seemed to disturb several board members. May I make a request? Professor Dak interjected. I would like access to Earth's zoological database to verify these claims. Principal Virax nodded. Granted. For the next hour, the board watched in stunned silence as Professor Dak displayed file after file from Earth's database. Wolves becoming loyal dogs, wildcats transforming into house cats over generations, humans riding atop enormous elephants, training bears for entertainment, swimming with massive orcas, handling venomous snakes. This one particularly interests me, Professor Dak said, displaying an image of humans working with honeybees. These insects have defensive stingers that inject venom, yet humans have developed methods to safely harvest their food products. It's called beekeeping, Tay explained. We use smoke to calm them and protective clothing to prevent stings. Professor Zith still looked unconvinced. So you're claiming that humans evolved alongside these creatures and developed these skills? Over generations? Partly, Jiu said. But we've also domesticated new species within single human lifetimes. Understanding animal behavior is something many humans have a knack for. This changes everything, whispered Professor Dak. I've been developing a new theory since yesterday's incident. What if humans didn't evolve as mere apex predators on their death world? What if they evolved as apex domesticators? The room fell, silent as the implication sank in. Think about it, he continued excitedly. On a world filled with dangerous creatures, the humans who survived weren't just those who could fight or flee, but those who could turn enemies into allies. Hanbin nodded. That makes sense. Throughout our history, human settlements with domesticated animals had huge advantages: better food sources, protection, transportation, and emotional bonds, added Tay. Don't underestimate how important our connections with animals are to us. A small, furry board member named Professor Loon, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. This is unprecedented in galactic history. Most spacefaring species either evolved away from their world's predators or developed technology to control them. None formed relationships with them. Maybe that's why humans adapted so well to our death world, GU suggested. Instead of just fighting nature, we learned to work with it. Professor Dak projected new data onto the screen. Look at these brain scans from human-animal interactions. The same neural pathways activate in humans when they interact with their pets as when they interact with their young or their mates. They literally love these creatures. And remarkably, he continued, many Earth animals show similar responses to their human companions. Dogs, for instance, show oxytocin spikes, a bonding hormone, when gazing at their human's eyes. Professor Zith had gradually shifted from skepticism to fascination. So yesterday, when you approached the razor locusts, we were applying principles we've developed over thousands of years, Tay finished. Reading body language, establishing trust, offering positive associations. Principal Vrax's skin pulsed with bright patterns, a sign of deep thought in his species. This has implications beyond academic interest. If humans can communicate with species the rest of us consider untamable, we might be able to teach others, GU offered. Many of these techniques can be learned. The meeting continued for hours as the humans answered questions, and Professor Dak presented more evidence from Earth's databases. By the end, a new understanding was forming among the board members. As they prepared to conclude, Professor Lund raised a small paw. I propose we document this as a new xenobiological phenomenon, the human domestication effect. Principal Vrax nodded in agreement. Very well. This investigation has been most enlightening. However, I suspect word of these abilities will spread quickly. Be prepared. Others may wish to test these remarkable skills. The three humans exchanged glances. They didn't know it yet, but the principal's words were prophetic. A rival academy had already received videos of the incident, and their senior researchers were preparing a challenge that would put human domestication abilities to the ultimate test. As they left the boardroom, Professor Dak pulled them aside. You should know. The Caprican Shadow Stalker arrived at Central Xenolab last week. If anyone wants to test your limits, that's what they'll use. What's that? Asked Hanbin. Only the most aggressive predator in 3 sectors, Professor Dak replied grimly. It's killed every handler who's attempted to study it. Even its own kind can't coexist with it. Rather than looking worried, the 3 humans appeared intrigued. Sounds interesting, said Tay with a small smile. We'd love to meet it. Word spread quickly across the galactic academic community. 3 human exchange students had tamed Venusian razor locusts using nothing but sounds and treats. The footage had gone viral on the Federation's knowledge network, sparking heated debates among xenobiologists everywhere. It was only a matter of time before someone questioned their abilities. This is ridiculous, Professor Kelt announced, his holographic image hovering above the conference table in Professor Dak's office. As head of the rival Centauri Xenobiology Institute, Kelt had always competed with Serenity Academy for funding and prestige. Those humans got lucky with the locusts. It was a fluke. Professor Dak's 8 limbs tensed with irritation. The evidence suggests otherwise. They've demonstrated remarkable abilities with various species in our facility since then. Parlor tricks, Kelt dismissed with a wave of his tentacle. Let's settle this with a real test. Tay, Jiu, and Hanbin sat quietly at the far end of the table, watching the exchange. They'd been summoned to the meeting but hadn't expected a direct challenge. What kind of test? Professor Dak asked cautiously. Professor Kelt's holographic mouth curved into what passed for a smile in his species. The Caprican Shadow Stalker arrived at Central Xenolab last week. We've been unable to conduct proper research because it's too aggressive. If your humans are such talented domesticators, let them try. A heavy silence fell over the room. The Shadow Stalker was infamous throughout the sector. That's not a test, Professor Dak protested. It's practically a death sentence. The stalker has killed 3 professional handlers already. Hanbin leaned forward, unexpectedly interested. What exactly is this creature? Professor Kelt seemed pleased by the question. His hologram flickered as he transmitted data to the room's display system. An image appeared of a 6-limbed predator with midnight blue armored plates covering its body. Yellow eyes glowed from a face that seemed designed for one purpose: hunting. Razor-sharp protrusions extended from each joint, and a ridge of spines ran down its back. The Capricorn shadow stalker, Professor Kelt explained, clearly enjoying the human's attention. Apex predator from the jungle moons of Caprica. So territorial that even mating pairs separate after reproduction. They've never been successfully contained for study until we managed to capture this specimen. Jiu studied the image carefully. What have you tried so far? Everything. Force fields, sedation, automated feeding systems. It destroys anything that enters its enclosure and attacks the barriers constantly. We can't even get close enough to collect proper samples. The 3 humans exchanged glances, having one of those silent conversations that puzzled the aliens around them. We'll do it, Tay said simply. Professor Dak nearly fell from his perch. You can't be serious, this isn't like the locusts. The Shadow Stalker is in a completely different category of danger. We understand the risks, Jiu assured him, but from what we're seeing in the footage, there are patterns in its behavior we might work with. What patterns? Professor Kelt scoffed. It's pure aggression. Hanbin pointed to the recorded footage now playing on screen. Look there. See how it backs off after each charge? And there. It's marking territory boundaries. Those are behaviors we recognize from Earth predators. Professor Kelt's hologram flickered with what might have been excitement. Then it settled. 3 days from now at Central Xenolab. We'll document everything for the scientific record. After, the hologram disappeared. Professor Dak turned to the humans, all 8 of his limbs trembling. This is madness. You don't need to prove anything. Actually, we do, Tay said quietly. If we're going to change how the galaxy understands interspecies relationships, we need to show what's possible. Besides, added Hanbin with a small smile, we've read about this creature now. We have some ideas. News of the challenge spread like wildfire. By the time the 3 humans arrived at Central Xenolab, a crowd of scientists, students, and even a few Federation officials had gathered to witness the event. The observation deck overlooking the Shadow Stalker's enclosure was packed. Beings from dozens of worlds pressed against the transparent barriers, whispering excitedly. Many were placing bets on how quickly the humans would retreat, or worse, be injured. Professor Kelt greeted them with barely concealed anticipation. The creature hasn't been fed for 2 days, so it's particularly energetic. Are you still certain you want to proceed? We are, Jiu confirmed, seemingly unfazed. But we'll need a few things first. She handed over a list that made Professor Kelt's eye stalks widen. Raw meat, blankets, audio equipment, what are these for? Our approach, Tay explained. And we'll need 7 days, not just one session. 7 days? Professor Kelt sputtered. That wasn't the agreement. Domestication isn't instant, Hanbin said firmly. If you want legitimate results, we need time to build trust. After some argument, Professor Kelt reluctantly agreed, especially when several Federation officials supported the humans' conditions. The scientific value of the experiment would be greater with a thorough approach. The first day was exactly as difficult as everyone expected. When Tay entered the outer chamber of the enclosure, the Shadow Stalker hurled itself against the inner barrier with such force that cracks appeared in the reinforced material. Its roar sent several observers fleeing from the deck, but Tay didn't retreat. He simply sat down on the floor just outside the inner barrier and began reading aloud from a small device. What is he doing? Professor Kelt demanded. Getting the creature used to his voice, Jiu explained. We'll take turns in shifts. The stalker needs to become accustomed to our presence without feeling threatened. For 3 days, the humans did nothing but take turns sitting near the barrier, talking quietly, playing soft sounds, and occasionally leaving food before departing. The shadow stalker continued to rage, but the observers noticed something odd. The periods of aggression were growing shorter. On the fourth day, Hanbin entered the chamber with a piece of scented cloth. The stalker approached the barrier, its yellow eyes fixed on him, but it didn't charge. Instead, it paced back and forth, occasionally sniffing toward the human. The scent carries markers similar to its home environment, Hanbin explained to the astonished scientist watching. We synthesized it from the biological data in your files. By the fifth day, the shadow stalker was taking meat directly from a feeding mechanism the humans had designed, one that required it to be calm to operate. The observers watched in stunned silence as the creature that had been impossible to study just days ago now stood patiently waiting for food. This is remarkable, admitted a Federation official. But it's still separated by a barrier. That's not exactly domestication. We're building trust, GU explained. Just like humans did with wolves thousands of years ago. You can't rush these relationships. On the sixth day, they lowered the inner barrier halfway. The laboratory staff held their breath, emergency protocols ready. The shadow stalker approached the opening, its deadly claws clicking against the floor, but it didn't attack. Instead, it watched as Tay placed a piece of meat just inside the threshold and backed away. Cautiously, the creature took the offering and retreated to its corner to eat. Tomorrow, Hanbin announced to the now massive crowd of observers, we'll enter its space. Professor Kelt, who had been growing increasingly quiet as the week progressed, finally found his voice. You can't be serious, it's still a wild predator? No, Tay corrected gently. It's a thinking being making choices. It's choosing cooperation over conflict because we've shown it respect and consistency. The final day arrived. The observation deck was so crowded that emergency administrators had to limit access. Federation officials from 3 sectors had arrived to witness the outcome. Hanbin entered the outer chamber alone. The inner barrier was completely retracted. The shadow stalker watched from the far corner, its yellow eyes unblinking. A hushed silence fell over the crowd as Hanbin slowly, deliberately sat down on the floor of the outer chamber. Then, breaking every protocol in the laboratory's history, he began to sing. The low melodic sound filled the chamber. The shadow stalker tilted, its armored head listening. Then, to the astonishment of everyone watching, it cautiously approached. Not charging, not attacking, just walking with measured steps toward the human. Hanbin continued singing, not moving from his position. When the creature was just 2 meters away, he slowly extended his hand, palm down. The shadow stalker froze. The observers collectively held their breath. Then it happened. The creature lowered its head and took the final step forward, allowing Hanbin's hand to make contact with its armored carapace. A sound emerged from the shadow stalker, a low, rumbling vibration that many swore sounded remarkably like a purr. Impossible, whispered Professor Kelt. But it wasn't impossible, it was simply human. 6 months after the shadow stalker incident, Serenity Academy looked completely different. The once quiet halls buzzed with activity as beings from across the galaxy hurried to secure seats in the grand auditorium. Today marked the opening of the first Galactic Symposium on interspecies cooperation, and no one wanted to miss it. Can you believe this place? Pip whispered to Gorks as they squeezed through. The crowd. The small blob-like creature had to stretch upward to see over the taller beings flooding the entrance. 6 months ago, most students wouldn't even sit near the humans in the cafeteria. Gorks's crystalline structure glinted under the lights. And now everyone's fighting for a chance to learn from them. The waiting list for their workshop series is 3 semesters long. The massive auditorium, designed to accommodate beings of all physiologies, was filled beyond capacity. Hovering, translation units drifted above the crowd, ensuring every word would be understood by all attendees. In the front row sat the highest officials of the Galactic Federation, their formal attire indicating the importance of the event. Professor Dak moved carefully to his reserved seat, all 8 limbs navigating through the crowd with practiced precision. His status had risen dramatically since his early support of the human students. The Doc Theory of Human Domestication Evolution was now required reading at xenobiology academies throughout the Federation. "Welcome, honored guests." Principal Vrax's voice boomed through the auditorium as he took the stage. His translucent skin pulsed with bright patterns of pride. Today marks a historic moment in galactic science. What began as a simple exchange program has blossomed into a revolutionary field of study. The crowd quieted as images appeared on the massive display behind him, footage of the now famous Shadowstalker incident, followed by dozens of similar successes with supposedly untamable species. It is my pleasure to introduce the pioneers of this revolution, Tae, Jiyu, and Hanbin of Earth. The three humans walked onto the stage amid thunderous applause, or its equivalent from Species Without Hands. They looked different now, more confident, dressed in new uniforms bearing both Earth and Federation insignia. The past 6 months had transformed them from exchange students to respected experts. Tae stepped forward first. "Thank you all for coming. When we arrived at this academy, we never imagined we'd be standing here today. We were just 3 students who happened to grow up on a world where living alongside other species is normal," Jiyu added. "We didn't realize how unique that perspective would be in the galactic community." Hanbin gestured toward the screen, which now displayed their groundbreaking thesis. Interspecies Harmony, Earth Domestication Principles Applied to Galactic Fauna. Today, he continued, we're excited to share not just theories but practical applications of what we've learned. The presentation that followed left the audience spellbound. The humans showed footage of techniques they'd developed for species across the galaxy, adaptations of Earth methods customized for alien physiologies and psychologies. Most importantly, Tae emphasized, these aren't just techniques for controlling dangerous creatures. They're about building relationships based on mutual respect and benefit. Jiyu demonstrated with a live example. A small door opened at the side of the stage and gasps rippled through the crowd as a juvenile Shadowstalker trotted out. Unlike the rage-filled creature from the challenge months ago, this one moved, calmly, its yellow eyes alert but peaceful. "This is Midnight," Jiyu explained as the creature sat beside her. "She was rescued from poachers last month. Using the methods we've developed, we've been able to establish trust in just 3 weeks." To prove her point, she gave a gentle hand signal. The Shadowstalker lay down, rolling onto its side to expose its vulnerable underbelly, the ultimate display of trust from its species. "What you're seeing isn't submission through fear," Hanbin explained. "It's cooperation through connection. We've learned that nearly every sentient species has the capacity for relationship if approached correctly." The presentation shifted to practical applications. They showed how their methods were revolutionizing conservation efforts for endangered species across the galaxy. Creatures previously too dangerous to study were now participating willingly in research programs. Extinct species being reintroduced to their native environments were thriving with human assistance. But perhaps most exciting, Tae said, is how these techniques are changing the way different intelligent species interact with each other. The screen displayed footage of diplomatic meetings where humans facilitated communication between previously hostile species, using principles derived from animal domestication to build trust between different cultures. The same patterns that help us connect with animals help us connect with each other, Jiyu explained. Understanding body language, respecting boundaries, creating positive associations, these principles are universal. Professor Dak joined them on stage for the final segment. What these young humans have taught us goes beyond practical techniques. They've shown us a fundamentally different way of relating to the universe around us. He projected a comparison of traditional galactic approaches versus the human method. Most spacefaring species achieved dominance on their worlds through technology that separated them from nature. Humans, uniquely, thrived by forming partnerships with the very creatures that could have destroyed them. The audience listened intently as he continued. This may explain why, despite coming from such a harsh world, humans display remarkable empathy. Their evolutionary path required understanding other species, not just controlling them. Hanbin nodded. We don't claim humans always get this right. Throughout our history, we've made plenty of mistakes in how we treat animals and each other. But this approach, seeking connection rather than dominance, represents the best of what we can be. As the presentation concluded, Principal Vrax returned to the stage alongside a tall, distinguished Federation official. Based on the groundbreaking work we've witnessed, the official announced, the Galactic Federation is proud to announce a new initiative. An image appeared on screen, showing a sleek spacecraft with both human and Federation markings. The Interspecies Harmony Program will create specialized teams of human domestication experts working alongside xenobiologists throughout Federation space. The crowd erupted in excitement as he continued. These teams will help conserve endangered species, establish sanctuaries on damaged worlds, and develop new approaches to interspecies conflicts. The first members of these teams stepped onto the stage, graduates from various Federation worlds who had been studying under the three humans for months. This is just the beginning, Tay told the audience. What started with 3 exchange students has grown into something much bigger than ourselves. From his seat in the front row, Professor Dak watched with unmistakable pride. 6 months ago, he had witnessed 3 young humans tame creatures that had terrified the finest minds in the galaxy. Now he was watching them transform galactic science itself. After the presentation, beings from dozens of worlds lined up to speak with the humans. Some had technical questions about specific species. Others wanted to discuss philosophical implications. A few simply wanted to express gratitude for a new perspective. As the day wound down, Professor Dak found the 3 humans taking a quiet moment away from the crowd. "Did you ever imagine it would come to this?" he asked them. Jiu smiled. "Honestly, we were just trying not to fail our exchange program." "Well," Professor Dak replied, his voice warm, "I'd say you've passed with flying colors." Tay looked out at the diverse crowd still mingling in the auditorium. The best part isn't the recognition. It's watching how quickly others have embraced these ideas. It turns out humans aren't the only species with the capacity to form these bonds. We just happened to evolve on a world that made it necessary, Hanbin added. Professor Dak nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson in all of this. Your death world didn't just make humans tough, it made you kind in ways we're only beginning to understand. As night fell on Serenity Academy, news of the symposium spread across the galaxy. The once terrified alien students who had gasped at the mere mention of Earth pets now eagerly signed up for workshops on interspecies communication. The humans, who had arrived as curiosities departed as pioneers of a galactic revolution, teaching the stars that sometimes the greatest strength isn't in dominating dangerous creatures, but in learning to dance with them.